and welcome to the November Teaching Code Social. Good, it stayed there. Just kind of how it works, kind of just the general welcome. We'll do some introductions, and then we'll get started with the two talks. So, welcome to the November Teaching Code Social. I'm Samantha Ahern. Sam, I co-lead the education activity in ARC, which is UCL Centre for Advanced Research Computing. Stella is with me this afternoon, and she's going to help. And we will whiz around the room in a minute. What is ARC? For those of you that don't know, it's the Centre for Advanced Research Computing at UCL. Basically, our job is to enable research using digital platforms across the institution. So pretty much that's kind of it, really. So we look after the data side of things, the software side of things, the infrastructure side of things, and we upskill people in doing that. So we teach both credit-bearing modules, and we deliver training as part of the doctoral school, and we'll deliver training for departments and various teams as well. And there. Education team has mission to meaningfully affect digital transformation of research across all disciplines through enabling UCL researchers at all levels. And it should be to get to grips with the technologies and skills required to master data-driven research. So we have opened up what we do to taught students as well as graduate students now. So we have a monthly coding club for taught students, and Rebecca, so UCL doesn't generally do much in term 3 for students, and they get very obsessed about that. So there is now this extended learning program that happens in term 3. So there's a series of courses and workshops that happen for them that is kind of beyond what is normally timetabled. So we've participated in that for the last couple of years. Students ask for it. They're not always so good at attending it. Yeah. So our first talk is going to be Kasia and Ziska, and they are joining us from Edinburgh. So I am going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to switch the screens over. So the Zoom screen is on the main screen in the room, and then you should both be co-hosts. So I will hand over to you.
Okay, so sorry about that, everyone, but hello, and thank you for having us at your Teach and Code Social, and thank you to Sam for inviting us and organizing this this guest talk. I'll just say straight up that I'm gonna have some questions probably on my next slide, and I was imagining that I would see you all and ask you to raise your hands, but we might just have a volunteer to count up how many people have raised their hands, and then we'll get the numbers that way. So my name is Kasia Banus. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Edinburgh. We have recently become part of the Edinburgh Medical School, but we are a team of people who are all focused on teaching data science within health and social care. So Ziska is also part of this team, and so are a few other colleagues whose names or slides you might see in the talk today, particularly Brittany Blankenship and Paweł Orzechowski. But actually what we will do today is introduce to you the Edinburgh Pair Programming Group, which is much larger than our team. So it's a group that brings people together from across the university, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. So yeah, we'll kind of introduce ourselves. We will tell you about our approach to teaching coding, because we like to share what we do and whether we think it works for us and how we think we can implement it. We want to tell you a little bit about this book that we are writing, because there is still time to contribute to it if you wanted to, and we are planning a launch for summer 2026. It will probably be an in-person event, so if you fancy the trip to Edinburgh, you can always save we don't have a date to be saved, but sometime in summer 2026 we will have this event where we'll launch the book, and you'd be very welcome to come along, and then we will hopefully have some time for a Q&A and a chat at the end. At the bottom of the slide you can see the URL of our group, so if you want to go there, you'll be able to see everything that we are up to, and it's updated fairly regularly. Yeah, and I think it will show up on every slide, so if you don't get it just now, it will come back to you. Ziska, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, how's my sound?
Yes, you sound much better, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, hi, I'm Francisca McManus. I'm a teaching assistant for MSc Data Science and Health and Social Care in Edinburgh Medical School, but also project coordinator for the book Teaching Programming Across Disciplines, which is an open source book that you're about to hear a bit more about.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So yeah, I should probably preface all of this by saying that I've gathered slides about all kinds of different things, and I will keep an eye on time. We'll probably try and be done with this part by 4. So I want to stop by like 3:50 or so that we have time for a chat and for questions. And I will try and tailor the slides a little bit. So this is why I'm going to start with a few questions so that I know what you all do and what you're interested in. And I don't talk to you about stuff that you don't care about. So if there is, if at any point you think, oh, I would want to know more about this, or we really don't want to know about that, then either let me know or put it in the chat, and then we will kind of tailor as we can. Okay, Ziska, next slide, please. Right, so we call ourselves Edinburgh Pair Programming Group because pair programming is a big part of what we do and what we talk about, but I sometimes worry that this name is a little bit too limiting, and that people think that all we do is pair programming. That's not the case. We do a whole bunch of different things, and I'll tell you about those. But yeah, pair programming, I think in some ways is what brought us together. And like I said, it's a group of people from across the university. I just looked on our Teams page and found that there is over 40 of us signed up to the Teams. It obviously doesn't mean that everyone is being super active. I think if we think about very active members, there is about 15 or so of us, and all of us are interested in teaching programming, and primarily outside of computer science or informatics. So Edinburgh has a school of informatics. It is full of wonderful people who do a lot of teaching, but I think maybe we felt that they already had a community and we didn't, and we wanted to have something that brought together all of the people who teach outside of informatics. Maybe we think that teaching outside of informatics is quite different to teaching in informatics. So we are kind of apart from informatics. We are not part of informatics, and I don't think at the moment we actually have any members from informatics, which is, interesting because they also do a lot of teaching programming. But I think what brings us together as a group is this idea that a lot of the students that we teach, they came to university and they didn't expect to learn coding. So both Ziska and I come from a psychology background, and in psychology at Edinburgh, students get taught how to do statistics in R. And I think all of them are in a state of shock when they come into their first lab and suddenly, they are sat in front of RStudio and told about how to type in code and how to do things using the keyboard rather than a point-and-click interface. We have colleagues from mathematics for whom I think it might be similar, that the students expected to be writing things on a blackboard or on a piece of paper, but not really coding. We have colleagues from literature, from history, from politics, from engineering, from chemistry. So it's really from everywhere, and I think some of the students maybe did expect to learn coding, but a big bunch just didn't think that was something they would need to do. So we are interested in equality, diversity, and inclusion, I think particularly because we work across different subjects, and we don't get a typical computer science-y crowd in our classrooms. And we really want students to get excited about programming and to stay excited about programming. And if they come in feeling that, oh, this is really not for me, I'm not going to be good at this, it's going to be terrible, we want to convince them that they will be just fine and that programming is for everybody. And we love the use of metaphors. So, knitting is a great metaphor for programming. Cooking is another great metaphor. So we really try to play with metaphors that go against the kind of traditional, white male image that a lot of people have associated with programming. We like talking about pedagogy, so flipped classroom is one of the things that we do a lot of. So we give students materials in advance, and then we ask them to come to class and practice and talk and discuss and experiment. We are interested in pedagogy in general, so lots of terms like threshold concepts, like constructive alignment. These are the kinds of things that rock our boat, that we like talking about. And we also quite like methods that are borrowed from industry. So some of us have an industry background, and actually pair programming itself is a technique that's used a lot in industry, and I think it's fairly slowly making its way into education. But yeah, we think it's great and we want to implement it. Right, I'm gonna ask for the next slide. Okay, this one will have things appearing on click. So here I'm gonna ask somebody who is in the room to tell me how many hands you can see. So how many people do we have on the call who actually teach coding?
So everyone in the room, which is 6 of us,
Okay.
and Ben. Who's on
Okay, and Ben is just online, right? Because Stella is both online and in the room, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So everyone teaches. Awesome. Then, yeah, I don't know where ARC is based. Are you guys based in computer science informatics, or are you completely standalone?
No, we are our own thing, but we are culturally aligned to computer science.
Okay, right. That's an interesting way of putting it. I wonder what that means.
So they do the admin for us, and they have the faculty tutor, because we're not an academic department, so we don't have a faculty tutor. So that side of things runs through them.
Okay.
We are otherwise completely responsible for the teaching.
Okay, and how many of you have a computer science background, like a degree in computer science?
I think that's just me.
All right, okay, so we've got people coming from other disciplines originally as well. Interesting. Okay, so our next question is, who has heard about pair programming before? How many hands do we have?
5.
Okay, so lots of you. And who has actually done it? That's gonna be the next question, Ziska. Yeah.
4 of us.
Okay. So we've got four people who have done it, 2 people who have not, and Ben is a question mark.
Yeah, I haven't.
You haven't. Okay, so we've got about half. Right. So this is mostly to help me tailor how much I should be telling you about pair programming, and it sounds like most of you have heard of it. Not about half of you have tried it. So I will show those slides, and then but I will not spend a huge amount of time on them. I'm also checking how we are doing on timing. Okay. Thanks, Ziska. This is the perfect slide for now. So yeah, there are kind of 3 things I wanted to tell you about that we do, and I'll be curious to hear whether you do them too in your work. So the first one will be pair programming. The second one is we really like having a modular course structure, and we call these like micro elements badges. So well, not everything we do, but a lot of what we do is divided into these small sections, and that means that we can kind of move them around and partition them or portion them for different audiences. So something we like to do is to prepare a course, say for postgraduate students, and then make it into a short course that people can take for, say, continuous professional development. And then sometimes we also make it into like a micro course that is, just 1 hour of an introduction to something. So having everything badged up in this way really helps with the repurposing of things. And then I also will tell you a little bit about this micro reflection framework that we use, which some of you may recognize from primary school. It's called 3 Stars and a Wish. We use it quite a lot, and we think that it actually works pretty well at university, even though it might seem a little bit, primary schoolish. Okay, so let's start with pair programming then. That should be on our next slide. I've asked you if you have heard about pair programming. I've asked you if you have done pair programming, but I have not asked you if you've used pair programming in teaching. So can we have a show of hands on that front?
I've tried.
Yes. Has anyone else tried?
Yeah. Yeah. So we've talked about it, we tried it, various degrees of success. Very much depends on the cohort of students, I found.
Yeah, I think we find that too. Okay, so I will kind of flash through this because if you have if you have heard of it and if you have tried it, then there is no point me explaining to you what it is. I think maybe we can chat a little bit more about this, like when does it work, when does it not work, and so on. So I think Ziska, we can probably fast forward to slide, I don't know, 13 even.
I don't have the slide numbers, I'm afraid.
Okay, so that's the one that has a picture on the right hand side, like a big photo. So I think the next one. Yes, here we are. Okay, so these are the benefits that we think it has. So just to give you a little bit of information about how exactly we use it. So we use pair programming in three modalities, as we call them. So I teach undergraduate students in person, and we use pair programming in my introduction to data science labs. So we have students sitting together and pair programming in the classroom. Then we have multiple colleagues who use pair programming when they teach online, and Ziska supports some of that as well. And then we have students working with one another online, sharing their screen, sometimes across the world, and working in this way. And actually, the picture you can see here is yet a third modality that is being used in Edinburgh, which is being referred to as hybrid. And this means that within the same classroom, we've got students who are in the room, and we also have students who are joining online. And they actually can also pair program across those two modalities. So sometimes you would have a student in the classroom being paired with a student who is online, while next to them you might see a pair of students who are both in the classroom working with one another. So I think this just shows how mad we are / how committed we are to this approach, that we really try and make it work everywhere. And I think the hybrid course just happened last week, and they did also have pairs working across modalities. So they keep doing this. We think that that there are huge benefits to pair programming, and I've got them on the slide. I won't read them all out loud. I think one of the key things that come from feedback from students is that it is indeed very useful for getting to know others in the cohort. So I teach courses with about 30 students, and I feel that by the end of that course, they really know one another. They, at least know each other's names, and they have had an opportunity to chat. It's a 10-week course, and we do pair programming twice a week. So, that means they've met 20 other students over the course of the semester, which I think doesn't happen that often. And we do get feedback that they find that really quite good to be able to get to know each other. But I kind of can imagine what you mean when you say that the success will depend on the cohort. So we do have sometimes students who are not really loving it. Recently, actually, I got feedback from students in my classroom that they felt that when they were not typing, so when they were not the driver, they were not learning. They felt that, this was wasted time just looking at somebody else typing. And I found that really surprising, because I felt that, if someone else is doing the typing, then you've got more time and more brain space to be accumulating knowledge and to be seeing what they are doing and learning that. But yeah, I think there's this perception that, that coding is typing. And I think a lot of us on the team very strongly disagree. Like, coding is so not typing. But I think in the students' minds, coding is typing. And if you're not typing, you're not coding and you're not learning. So I think some of it is probably about perception and just telling students, a little bit more about what we think programming is, and that at the end of the day it is about thinking and not about typing. But I think also there is some work that we need to do in guiding them how to be a good navigator, so how to engage even if you're not typing, and to actually ask questions and to comment on things. And I think the students we find, so the students we teach, or I teach in my courses, a lot of them come from medicine, the medical school, and I think there is a very competitive culture there. So we feel that they are very afraid to admit that maybe they don't know something, or that they haven't read the materials, and maybe they don't fully understand what's going on. That seems to be a taboo. So also having an atmosphere where students can actually talk openly about where they are at would probably help. But I'm doing what I can to make that happen, and I still don't feel that I fully succeeded. So it's a tough one. Maybe this is actually a good moment to hear more about your experiences. So Sam and the UCL team, what have you found challenging?
Oh, so we've tried this actually with a full module, and it's about 70 students, and they are mixed. And some students don't like talking to other students that are not from the same place as them. So we have kind of language difficulties, which are increasingly exacerbated by real-time translation. So they're not practicing their language skills. So they don't want to speak to people that don't speak the same language as them generally, and we get this with group work. So they're much more hesitant because we have a flipped lecture, right? So they have their notes in advance. So then they don't like then having to talk to somebody in the session. So we do a milder form of this where they have to talk to each other to give each other feedback. We don't do the driver and the navigator thing so much because it doesn't work in much smaller workshops. So in the main carpentries where there's 25 of them, not so much. But when we've got a small cohort of 5 or 10, and we've got them for a few days, sometimes a week, and they've got to know each other, then actually that works much better. So in small groups where they've been working together for a little while, if it's a multi-day workshop, it works because they're much more comfortable. But in large groups, not so much, generally.
And if it's one of those multi-day workshops, would you get them work in the same pair throughout, or do you get them to switch?
It depends. It depends. Sometimes we'll get them to switch.
Great. Ziska, did you have any experiences you wanted to add from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, we see such a huge difference between the undergraduate and the postgraduate cohorts, because the postgraduates, particularly our master's students, are online part-time, so they tend to be older, they're already working, and they really value the chance to learn from other students, and they're very happy to sit back and watch and learn from them and see how they do things. Whereas the undergraduates really don't see it that way, and they have this quite strong distinction between theory in the lectures and practice time. And so if they're not typing, they're not doing their practical activity. They did mention that if they do discussion groups or something before pair programming, they feel more comfortable being vulnerable with each other. And I think across both cohorts, they feel worried that they're slowing their partner down or they're being slowed down by their partner. And they did see it a little bit as being forced to develop their teamwork skills. Whereas for us, this is kind of a bit, it's fun and it's a bonus, but we're not doing it to improve their teamwork skills as such, it's to improve their coding. So I think they had quite mixed feelings on it, but maybe that sprung from not quite understanding what our aims were when doing it.
And actually, I think that is a thing that a lot of them see the code as an output and they want the output. What they don't get is that the real thing is the thinking and working it out. And that's the thing that we actually want them to think about and do. It's not the doing and the output that's the thing. It's how they get there. And I think that's kind of that's the bit they're not getting, right? That it's that thinking bit and that explaining bit, and oh my God, we see it. The debugging lesson where they don't actually read the error message that we want them to read and they just copy and paste it straight into ChatGPT. And they completely miss the point of what it is that they should be learning in the session. And I think that's got slightly worse as well, actually. Dare I say it, the commoditization of higher education has not helped our cause in that.
Yeah, they did tell me that some partners really used ChatGPT a lot and others didn't. So they were never quite sure what to expect in terms of debugging strategy. And then for those which were not comfortable debugging because they didn't feel like they'd been taught it enough, they said it was the blind leading the blind, and they're supposed to be supporting each other, but neither of them feel ready to do that. So teaching them how to kind of, even though in theory they have all the information they need in the course materials, they really don't feel like that.
Yeah, but I do think that the generative AI issue is now also kind of exacerbating all of the problems. Because, yeah, like Ziska said, we have students who are using it a lot and students who don't. And we kind of are remaining agnostic. I mean, I'm not a huge fan, so I don't teach the students how to use it. Almost on purpose, but I also don't discourage them from using it. I stay relatively silent on the issue. And if I imagine myself being paired with someone who really is using generative AI a lot, I think I would be trying to learn that from them, right? At least know how they are using it and is it effective. But yeah, I think among the students there is still quite a lot of ambivalence around it, and I think they are worried that we'll have feelings about it, and yeah, we do, but we try and hide them as much as possible. But yeah, I think it does make life more difficult, because then it's no longer pair programming, it's like a trio programming with two students and generative AI probably. Okay, I feel like we can probably move on from pair programming, and we can come back to it in the chat afterwards, but you all know what it is. I guess I would just say that in the group we all are pretty evangelical about pair programming, so we keep going with it kind of no matter what, because we believe so strongly that it's a useful thing for the students to do. But it does require quite a lot of perseverance. We see that, and almost in every session you have to remind the students how pair programming works and why, and also we are pretty adamant about them actually switching driver and navigator after every task. And we go around and ask, when did you last switch and who is the driver now, and all of those things. So we feel like it's worth doing it, but also we know that some instructors might just not feel comfortable with this degree of micromanagement almost, and that's fine if you find yourself in that kind of setup. Okay, let's move to the next slide. Right, so this is basically an interlude. It's just a single slide on this whole idea of badges that I mentioned before. So this is all about modularizing things and splitting content into small chunks. So I think the word badge is used in many different meanings, and even the University of Edinburgh is recently pushing some like micro badging or micro credentials platform, and they call things badges. But our way of thinking about badges is that a badge is a small skill that you can learn and that builds on top of your other skills. So where content is being built, it's built around these kinds of skills. Okay, let's, learn about iteration, or learn about loops, or learn about, debugging could be a badge, right? And then usually those of us who use badges a lot, I'm actually not one of those, but Pavel does, and Ziska is working on those courses as well. So there is usually a fairly set structure that each badge would have, and often that means that there is a video or several videos for the students to watch. Then there will be some coding exercises for them to complete on their own. So this is before they come to classroom. They are supposed to do some stuff at home, and they also fill out this mini diary that I'm going to come back to after this interlude. So that structure is relatively constant across different badges, which is good because the students get used to it and they know exactly what to expect. So this set of videos, some coding exercises to do, and the little diary at the end, that constitutes a badge. And then once the students have completed the badge, they would come to a pair programming lab and they would use what they have learned in that context. And that's also what they would use in their assignment. So it's a tool for structuring our materials. Like I said, it's useful if we want to be using these materials across different places, but it's also good because our students love structure. So they really like having a predictable way that things will be presented to them. And if the structure was changing every week, they would be complaining that they get lost. Like Ziska said, a lot of the students we teach are part-time and online, which means they have limited time and often kind of, limited cognitive capacity at the end of the day when they are tired because they've just come back from work. They also have family and many different things. So we think that giving them this predictable structure is really helpful because then they know what to expect, and they also know that things come in fairly small chunks. So if they only have half an hour, they will be able to maybe watch a couple of videos in that half hour and then do the rest later. So that's kind of another advantage of doing things in batches. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, and that's kind of the third and final tool that I want to tell you about. And this is a self-reflection tool. So many of us use this tool called 3 Stars and a Wish. And this is a structure for students to self-reflect. And I think on the next slide we have the source of this. Yes, so I can see a comment that Sam used it all the time when teaching secondary. Exactly, I think the idea comes from primary school. So it's not particularly, higher education academic. It's an educational idea. And what we do is we ask students to give feedback, but it's not really feedback about how we are doing things. It's kind of self-feedback. It's a self-reflection. So they write 3 stars, so 3 things that they loved, and 1 wish, something that they wish to understand better. So it's not a wish about what we could do differently, but it's a wish about what they could understand better or do differently themselves. And I think on the next few slides we just have how we use it, and then we have some slides on the benefits of it. So let's go back to how we use it. There we go. So again, because we teach online a lot, if you teach online, there is this tool that people tend to use, which is called a discussion forum. So some kind of online tool where you can have threads and people responding to each other, but also people seeing each other's stuff. So if you use 3 Stars and a Wish in this kind of online context, then you would ask every student to submit their 3 stars and a wish onto a discussion forum, and they can see each other's work there. If you were teaching in person, which I do, then I think you would basically do the same. I think doing it on an online discussion forum is probably the easiest way because the students can post easily and then they can also see each other's stuff there, which is important for some of the benefits, and we'll come to that in a second. It's good to have one of these mini diaries, mini reflections per topic. So if you're working with badges, it is often done at the end of the badge, but it could also be after a video or after doing an exercise or after a whole week. What were the things that you loved about the week, and then what do you wish to understand better or do differently? And we also encourage students to complete these, not all crammed at the end of the course, but to do them regularly. So maybe every week or after every badge, because that's when the ideas are fresh in their minds. But again, because students are busy and sometimes we can't have these deadlines every week, some of them will just write all of these at the end. It does happen, but it's not the preferred way. Okay, so let's have a look at the benefits. So we think that that this is good for the student. So self-benefits, here we mean for the student self. We believe that it might lead to deeper learning. So you might be familiar with the idea of metacognition, that when you're doing some learning, it's actually quite good to step a little bit onto a higher plane and look at your own learning and reflect on how everything is going. So the 3 stars and a wish are a tool that's kind of pointing in that direction. It encourages metacognition because it encourages the student to think, okay, how is this learning going for me? Am I finding it interesting? Am I finding it easy? And also, what are the things that I think I could do better for my own learning? So that's the metacognitive deeper learning part. It comes almost for free, so it's a very small task, and we've been getting feedback from students that yes, they could ask generative AI to write it, but it takes so short that it's easier to just write it yourself. So in that way, they are not tempted to, cheat, so to say, or to use tools that don't really encourage reflection, because it's so easy to just do it. It's personal and it's positive, right? So we've got this 3 stars and only 1 wish. So mostly it's about what you liked, what you loved, what worked for you, what resonated with you. And then this 1 wish about, okay, and maybe I can try and understand this thing better. So the focus is very much on the things that are going well. Right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so there are also benefits to the teams, and by team we mean the group of students. We think that it's really useful for building a cohort. So the fact that the students can read each other's contributions, it makes them feel that they are not in this alone, that they are in it together, and that everybody else is going through a similar journey, and they can see what brings other people joy and what's maybe challenging. Because the challenge is included there, if they are struggling with something and they put it in their wish, chances are somebody else is also struggling with a similar thing, and they can see that in the wishes of other people. So that again is great for not feeling alone in the dark, but knowing that there are others there who are doing similar stuff. But also, because they can see each other's writing, they can learn from others. So somebody else may have found like a follow-up, or maybe they found a really nice video that illustrates a specific concept, or maybe someone has just a slightly different perspective. That's where they get to learn from one another. And I saw Samantha before mentioned peer feedback. This is one way in which peer feedback can happen, because the students get to see each other's ideas, and then they might get inspired, or they might say, oh yeah, similar to this person, I also found this interesting, and so on. Right, and I think we've got final slide on benefits. And these are kind of more pedagogical, or thinking about the course as something that we as educators run. So it's helpful for gamifying and scaffolding. So if you have badges, and then you have a mini diary, a 3 stars and wish at the end of each badge, then you're kind of getting the students to wrap up this particular bit of learning, and then they get to move on. So they get an achievement for doing just a little mini diary, but you're kind of showing them that, okay, you've now finished 1 bit of learning, you can move on to the next bit of learning. It is good for structure. I think that that's related to what I've just said, and also for motivation, because the student gets to reflect on what they've done already. And, over the course of a 5 or 10 week course, there is a lot of learning. So it's good to remind yourself that you've actually come a long way. For instructors, it's also great for pulse checking. So if you see that a lot of students get confused about something, it might be something you want to explain again, or try and explaining in a different way. If you see that everybody's enjoying a particular activity or a particular topic, you might build more on that in the next week or at the end of the course. So it's a very good way of getting feedback from the students without even calling it that, because all they are doing is reflecting. Ziska, you've been, I'm sure, reading a lot of 3 stars and wishes. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, it's particularly useful. We tend to scan it each week and see what common issues are, and then we can approach them in the next tutorial. And yeah, I think the badges are just so much more doable. It splits the week's content into 3 often. Students are doing this, as you said, in the evening when they're tired, and they tend to get overwhelmed very quickly in the course, and then they get into a cycle of not really engaging because they're overwhelmed. And I think the badges helps tackle that.
Great. Yeah, so, some of you might be using something similar. We can come back to it in the Q&A. We just have, I think, how many? 5 more slides that are more about kind of what we are up to, so much shorter and less conceptual than these. And I think in 2 or 3 minutes I'll be done talking, and then we can open the floor to questions and discussion. So yeah, Ziska, if you show the next slide. So as a group, we organize an annual event which is called the Winter School, and actually in 2026 sadly we will not have one, because instead we'll be doing the book launch in the summer. But I think in 2027 we'll be back with the Winter School, and it's basically a conference that brings together people who teach programming across many different disciplines. It attracts over 100 people. We run it hybrid, so there's not quite 100 people in this picture. I think there were 60 of us that year, but there was another 60 online. And then the following year we had similar numbers. So, if you're interested, then keep your eyes out for the announcement of the 2027 Winter School. And yeah, we met Samantha at the Winter School, so it's great for bringing people together and just kind of finding out who is doing what, and how can we work together, maybe collaborate, do some research or some practical stuff together. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, so yeah, we have a current big project, which is writing an edited book. And Sam already mentioned that she's working on one of the chapters. So we are quite surprised ourselves by how well this is going, because it all started with, this idea of like, oh, let's just say to people, hey, we're gonna write a book. And if I remember correctly, we have now 17 chapters, is that right? Just or do we have more?
17 submitted and quite a few more in progress.
Right, so yeah, it's actually happening, which I think amazes all of us, that we have all of these people doing work to write chapters for the book. The book has a working title of Teaching Programming Across Disciplines. I think we'll see how well that fits once we've got all the chapters in there. But the good news is, and let's have the next slide, that there is still time to contribute. So if you have ideas that you'd like to share with the world, if you've got perhaps a piece that you've written sometime for some course that's sitting in your cupboard or your drawer, that's never been read, or maybe you've got thoughts that you want to share, then all of these would be great materials for chapters. So we imagine the chapters being relatively short, like up to 10 pages maybe. They can be case studies, they can be your musings on a particular subject, they can be fairly academic if that's what you like. So I don't know, if you want to do a literature review on pair programming in education, sure, you can do that. So we are quite open with regard to the format, and we'd love to have more contributions still. If you show the next slide, Ziska, I have the timeline that you have actually created. So yeah, our initial deadline for chapter drafts was in September, so obviously that has passed, but we are still accepting chapters, and I think the latest we would accept chapters would probably be January. So if you have any ideas for things that you would like to even just discuss, no commitment is needed at this point. You could just reach out and say, hey, I'm thinking about maybe writing about this, what do you think? We have an email address that we'll show in a second, and Ziska is the person at the end of that email. So you can reach out and just ask a question, or you can ask Sam, who is already one of our authors, and get a bit of feedback and advice. So let's go to the next slide. That will be the final slide. Thank you for listening to us talk for all of this time, and for inviting us. This is the email that you can reach out on with anything. And then at the bottom, you've got the link to our website. You can read about all of that we do. We like to chat. We'd love to see you at the book launch or at the Winter School in 2027. Just let's talk more about teaching programming.
Thank you. We've got about 5 minutes for questions. What questions do you have? And I will turn the laptop around.
What's your take on collaborative sessions in VS Code?
So what's your take on collaborative sessions in VS Code?
Right, I can't answer this one because I've never used VS Code. Ziska, have you?
I've used VS Code, but not collaborative sessions. Sorry.
Okay, I think it's really great for pair programming. You can work. So when students get fatigued, or when people get fatigued when they're just looking at code, you can both at the same time see each other's cursor move through the code and work on the code. You can still have one driver and one person who kind of follows, but it's easier to communicate, especially when you're not in the same room.
Oh, okay. So when you're doing it remotely?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. So you're basically kind of logging into the same environment and then working that
And
way.
you have different colors. You can see each other's cursors move in VS Code, and I think you can do it. I've done it with up to 8 people in one session. So if you're all looking at the same code, especially if it's online, you cannot really point to it, or if you have to continue saying like, oh, this line number, like you can just highlight with a color the section you're talking about. So it's maybe something to also discuss or mention in the book.
Yeah. You can write a chapter about it.
I was going to say, you just wanted to write a chapter.
So I think, so we teach, because we are kind of data science focused, we teach primarily R and Python. And for R, we are using RStudio, and for Python, we use Jupyter Notebooks. But in all of our pair programming, we would screen share. So there is, I guess you can see what someone else is doing. And I think in a way, doing the screen sharing really reinforces the driver-navigator divide, because literally only one person is able to, type the code into this particular environment. So I think VS Code, it sounds like it offers a lot of benefits, but you can all type at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So we'd have to be much stricter on the policing then.
Yeah, because the idea there is one driver and one navigator, but yeah.
I mean, we do tend to switch less frequently than you would ideally do, because there's so many costs associated with screen sharing and students getting set up and sharing their code. So that would fix that issue somewhat.
True.
Yep. Speak very loudly.
Yeah, okay. So I'm a big fan of getting students to work together in class. I think it happens quite naturally often in computer classes, students work together. And I have a group project, half of the module of the group project. So I'm just kind of wondering how much extra benefit, or what is the extra benefit of doing something that's specifically pair programming, with a driver navigator, versus the kind of organic collaboration that I actually see quite a lot in my classes, especially when they get into the group project.
I would argue, so the navigator has to think very carefully about what it is they're trying to achieve, think it through and articulate that to someone else, whilst also scanning code. So it's kind of this extra bit of, so the person typing isn't going to type anything unless they're told to, right? So the navigator really has to think deeper and also think about how to communicate that in a way to someone else. So it's this thing of teaching another person. So you have to kind of understand it in a bit more detail. So it forces that deeper reflection, whereas actually, yes, you'll get that one organic thing, but they'll bounce off each other. So yes, you get that peer learning, but you don't get that deep working it out yourself and rewiring your brain of how to, okay, this is how it is. What do I do? What do I see? How do I then translate that into somebody else, into something for somebody else to understand? That's where that deeper bit kind of comes in, rather than that slightly more organic bit. Kasia, do you have anything else on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the organic stuff is great, but I think often it reinforces established dynamics, right? So if you have a student who, I don't know, knows a lot and they know a lot, they will have a tendency to just give this knowledge to everyone else. And I think having this strict driver-navigator dynamic can go a long way towards curbing that a little bit, because you're forcing each person to be in each role. So even if someone feels less sure, at some point they are the ones having to lead on the typing, or they are the ones having to talk through ideas. And I think that can be quite useful in breaking, patterns of behavior that we do often see students actually fall into. Ziska, I saw you starting to talk as well.
Yeah, because I saw a comparison of this recently, because I was teaching a class where students submit a group project and they're meant to do pair programming. So they work in groups of 5 with 1 driver, 4 navigators. And for one group, the screen wasn't working. And so they just started working as if it's a normal group project, each on their own laptop. And it was really quite a striking difference. They'd done that, they'd assigned each other roles, but they were all working on different things and all struggling on their individual things without really helping each other. So I think they thought they were being more efficient, but then they were all getting stuck. And then for me teaching, it was quite hard because that room has 60 to 70 students. So usually I come to a table and there are 5 students stuck on the same problem. And then the answer I can give them is helpful to all 5 at once. Whereas on that table, I had 5 different questions and 5 people stuck on different things for that same group project. So definitely from my perspective, teaching that many students, it was a lot easier with the pair programming.
Cool, thank you. I'm going to have to wrap your session up there, I'm afraid, just in the interest of time. But thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Lovely to meet you and talk to you. We are gonna scoot off, but we'll watch the recording later and hopefully we'll see you another time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Do you want to quickly all grab a drink and something to answer, then we will do talk number 2. Okay, so it is the microphone on the laptop, unfortunately. You do need Menti for this. I will try to get myself out of the way. Okay. That's the best we're going to get. Rebecca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm an imposter. I'm Rebecca. I'm a teaching fellow in geophysics and engineering. So I made the trek from South Kent, and together we've co-authored with some other people this chapter on accessibility in programming teaching, I guess.
Yeah.
Which we're going to do through the means of Menti.
Yes. Well, we're going to see what you know. We want you to put some things in Menti and get some ideas. And we'll see kind of how it goes with people in the room. So we were both in Edinburgh and contributed. What am I looking at? Okay, there we go. Fabulous. Certainly me. I've been thinking about how we teach for a while and what that means. And then there was a talk at Edinburgh and I kind of went, actually, yeah, really good point. It was actually more about kind of the carpentry's way of doing it, which I've been thinking about for a while, doesn't suit everyone. So you have, so you code along in real time in a carpentry's workshop and they don't see the material to the end of the workshop. And we do it at the pace of the slowest person, but it does mean that people need to kind of keep along. And if that processing bit is difficult or delayed for any reason, then it becomes quite difficult. And I've kind of been worrying about it. I mean, we do a lot of these workshops, and I've kind of been worrying about that for a while. Along as it's just some other things of just how we teach, and we're in large rooms, and we put content online, and just that general bit of how do we make this inclusive, and that's certainly how I came to it. I don't know, Rebecca, if that was.
Yeah, I guess I've not taught that much carpentry, but sort of had done various teaching things in various ways, and the challenges that coding on the board and asking people to copy down and coding together present. I guess also as a school child, I, for most of my schooling, couldn't read the board and then refocus my eyes on the page. So I would take notes by dictation, basically. But once you get to coding, then that's non-goer, really. And then I had lessons in how to focus my eyes.
Oh,
and it was
so my biology teacher for year 9 and years 10 and 11, because she taught us general science year 9, didn't actually write anything ever on the board, and everything was dictation. Like literally, we just wrote our exercise books for like 3 years. Yeah. Right. Okay. You need to do a bit of voting in Menti. And Sally, you can do this as well. How familiar with you with each of these things? If you have no idea what we're talking about on the left-hand side, if you know exactly what we're talking about, or you might have a vague idea, then it is somewhere on the right-hand side. Menti code is 13915534. So participatory live coding, yeah. So this is they code along with us in real time. We do this all the time. Pair programming. Just had a chat about pair programming. Various knowledge. Not so much on the explicitly modeling, problem solving, or the discovery-based learning. Yeah, most of us are quite familiar with the lecture in the lab. That's certainly how I was taught as an undergrad. I'd be spoken at for 3 hours about code, and then sent off to a separate room to do some exercises with my friends, and then the flipped classroom. Rebecca, would you like to talk about problem solving and discovery-based learning?
Yeah, so I guess explicitly modeling problem solving, I sort of debated when we were writing it about whether it was a teaching approach in itself. Perhaps it's more modeled during other things. So when you do live coding, you might already do it in the sense that it's, I've got this problem that I want to solve. Now I'm going to tell you precisely how I'm approaching breaking down that problem. And then I'm going to say, oh, well, now I'm writing a function to do this task. And actually, I don't write in linear order. I might write my function and the arguments that are coming into it. And then I might write the return statement because I know what I want the function to give me at the end. And oh, now I'm going to think about the logic. And finally, I'm going to like make the formats right. And so this is sort of something that we naturally do when we code, if you sort of relatively experienced at coding, but which students find that jump from, I must write from line 1 to line 100 in order, to actually this is how we solve problems. I guess discovery-based learning then is about, it's about sort of generally real world scenarios, and it's sort of letting the student learn for themselves. So it's sort of very constructivist in how you do things. So students have a problem, they need to write some code that makes an address book, and they're now going to think through how to do that problem. Maybe you've explicitly modeled it, and now, oh, I need to learn how to make a dictionary, so now I'm going to go and learn how to make a dictionary. And so it's sort of like students are building their own knowledge based on the sort of real world task and how they move through that task.
So not as complicated as it sounds. In which case then, which of these do you do? So the ones you do whack at the top and the ones you do the most up at the top. If you don't do it at all, or very rarely, more towards the bottom. And it may be that you do a mix, right? Yeah, so when I'm thinking about what happens in our talk modules, they're both flipped, and the degree of flip, Python more so than C++, but they're both flipped. But then what happens in the timetable session is a bit of this and a bit of this.
Can you just describe a little bit how your flip classroom works?
So the input is done up front. So we actually have websites which are like the textbook. And so they read about the topic, they will do a practice task that will guide them through that beforehand, before they come to lecture. We will quiz them on it. When they get into lecture, there'll be like a Menti quiz, see how much they understand.
We're talking about a lecture in the lecture.
In the lecture theatre itself, we will actually run a poll with them, ask them what they didn't get, and then we'll go through that. And then they have a bunch of structured exercises in GitHub that they then work through in this kind of discovery way. And where we need to, we will explicitly model solving the problem.
And because there's a quiz, they actually do the flipping part.
Well, we asked them how many of them actually did the pre-reading, and that's variable. And then we quiz them as well. And then some of them actually, so because we have master's students, some of them are older. So some of them are literally, so because they're master's modules, they could be final year undergraduates, literally straight done their masters, or returning from industry to do their masters. So sometimes we've got PhD students that have to do something, and it's part of their first year. So we've ended up with professional research software engineers in the software engineering with Python, and it's just kind of like, yeah, if they've not read it, it doesn't really matter too much. But we're hoping they still learned something out of it. So all of these have pros and cons. And I don't know if it is worth putting it in the Menti, but just kind of, if we're thinking about that, we have got quite a mixed cohort of students with various kind of accessibility needs and a mix of neurodiverse needs. What are kind of the pros and cons if we've got this participate like coding that, you know, they are watching this on the screen and they are doing this in real time? What are the kind of the things that we need to think about for that, and where is it good and where is it not so good?
Well, I guess, have you been taught through the medium of participatory live coding ever?
I taught it myself. Total amateur, to be honest.
So,
Yeah.
so I actually did attend the Carpentries workshop. It was one of the very first ones we ever ran, and it was a colleague who's no longer here. Now, right, these days we're like, okay, you go at the pace of the slowest, and we stop them, and quite regularly. And we also know there is, and if we use Carpentries, we also know there's way more material in the Carpentries lesson than you could ever teach in the scheduled amount of time, right? I was in my master's degree, so I was coding regularly, admittedly in MATLAB, and I have a background in computer science, and it was the Python one, and I could not keep up, right? They just were going for it without pausing for breath. So how may that be problematic?
I mean, I don't do this much at all in my classes.
Yeah.
Automatic.
Yeah, so we do this all the time.
Yeah.
We teach like this all of the time, but I also kind of go, right, so actually, yeah, we enlarge the screen and sometimes we screencast, but if you're not keeping up, there's only so much we can pause. And then it's like, well, actually, if you're dyslexic, this is really bad. this is
Easy to make a catastrophic typo.
Yeah. So we were kind of going through this, and there was a question of this. So this is kind of heralded as like a research-based way of doing it. And yes, there was this bit of, if you were doing it, you're embedding it, and you've got that muscle memory. It's the same as writing. It's that same idea that you are reinforcing it, but then there are all these kind of issues of, well, if English isn't your second language, it's a bit slower to process it. if you are dyslexic or you've got a hearing impairment, in this room we don't have a proper microphone, so which is a bit of a pain, right? And I always moan at people, just click on the microphone. I'm forever moaning at people, do you have to wear the microphone? Yes, so that becomes tricky, and we kind of unpick all of this actually in the chapter a bit. But yeah, I've been worrying about this for a while.
Last week I was teaching the Napari introduction in image analysis, and we were doing live coding as well. But one girl kept, because of my Dutch accent,
Yeah.
I think I was saying, instead of viewer, that I was saying fewer.
Yeah.
So she kept typing and she couldn't, she could have moved a little bit to the front and we made it a bit bigger. But it took a while for her to understand that this was viewer and not fewer. Yeah.
So on my placement year, my supervisor was Spanish, and they pronounce a V as a B. So she's telling me instructions in challenge, she's saying minus B, and it's minus V, and
Yeah.
it took a while, yeah. So there's all of that. Pair programming.
Sorry,
Sorry.
I can't remember the slides. Do we come on to like alterations? And shall we briefly discuss?
We can discuss alterations. I was kind of hoping you might pop up with ideas of alterations. So what might we do to alter?
I mean, actually, the way my classes are organised, I can't work out if it fits into any of these categories. I just have a load of notes that they work through, and they work through at their own pace. So it's pretty informal, really. And then I might do some live coding or something at some point if I feel like it, basically.
Yeah.
But essentially, students can just work through at their own pace, which is how I'd like to learn. So maybe that's why I've done it that way. I don't know if it's right.
That's exactly what I did as well.
Yeah, right.
So I don't actually think there is a right way. I think there are ways that lend better to others.
But you did mention that there is good practice and stuff.
I mean, there's good practice in all of them, right? So this is great for embedding the skill. But if you need more processing time and you're not confident and things, then actually it's a bit of a nightmare, right? Because you're worried about catching up on that, and that stress does it. And I made the mistake of mentioning time the other week in a workshop. And then one of them said they just felt really stressed the entire time. It's because I knew there was a lot of content and they kept being late. I'm like,
I mean, some students might be 3 times slower than other students.
Yeah.
Even at the start of the module.
Yeah. So we've got a 2-day workshop and we're trying to cover stuff, and it's really hard. I get quite stressed, and it shows. Yeah, and then they get stressed, and then it's just stressy.
I guess what people like about it is that I think they, in a lot of the research that backs up things like participatory free live coding, they have a relatively homogeneous cohort of students, and so it keeps people on track.
Were they computer science students?
No, so carpentries was specifically written for scientists that were moving into the computational science. So they were all complete novices. So everyone is a novice and hasn't done anything before. That's kind of the assumption.
But they're good at learning.
Yeah, generally, because these would be researchers. So they're kind of at that. Yeah. They're postdocs, right?
And
so
they know they want to learn it.
Yeah. And we mostly teach like this to PhD students and researchers. So we kind of know they're good at learning. When I teach this to professionals, they are distracted by their day job. And they're not actually coding with me in real time. And then that means that they've missed a bit because I've scrolled up on the screen. And I kind of like, well, in theory, you've done what I've done. So actually, you should have it in front of you. But actually, no, they've looked at an email because they're a clinician and something's happened. And
I think one of the good things about doing this is that students hear someone experienced to talk through how they do it and their thought process, and I think that's really valuable.
And I think I should do more of this, because the feedback I get is from students sometimes, or quite often, is, where's the teaching? I'm teaching myself.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, well, I like you to teach yourself. But I think that they do appreciate they do appreciate that front of class kind of teacher time, I think. When I try to avoid it because I have all these, I have to teach it 3 times. I don't like to commit myself to have to actually be there. I want TAs to look after it, so I like to keep it flexible in that way.
So we have a 1-to-10 ratio in the room when we teach like this. So it's very expensive for us to do, but we don't do more than 1-to-10 because when we do more than 1-to-10, you can't support them all.
Do you have like teaching assistants?
It's ARC staff, so it's ridiculously expensive. It's insanely expensive because everyone's a 7 or an 8, right? And even in the taught modules, it's it's led by an ARC staff member with support from 2 ARC staff members and a TA. So when we do the flipped lecture, that still has a lot of that's more like 1-to-20, but
I think I have about one.
Yeah.
But the TAs are not always well utilised.
I'll be technical work.
On my own.
How many students do you have?
Well,
Really?
Yeah.
I like to have lots of TAs.
So our lecture isn't any Peter Laberton or lecture theatre. Yeah.
But I guess what you're doing in providing notes, if combined with participatory live coding, would actually solve some of its flaws, right? Because if you've got a function in the notes that's actually what you're live coding as well, then if a student gets lost, you can be like, oh, it's function 3 in the notes.
Yeah. So we intentionally don't share the notes, although I'm thinking that maybe we should. Because we don't want them reading the notes and not doing the participatory live coding. So there is a
Yeah,
there's something-
I find that sometimes I'll do something fast, the one students are still working on what they're doing, and I kind of think, well, in many ways, it's up to students to make use of what's there in a way that works for them. There might be certain things I want them to do.
Yeah.
But I think students, actually, even at the undergraduate level, are already pretty well attuned to how they.
I would argue their self-regulation sucks.
The what?
Self-regulation sucks because they've not had, certainly home grade students would never have had to learn self-regulation because they're so fed now all the way through. At master's level, certainly, but certainly not at early undergrads now. That there is no kind of, they've not had to kind of manage themselves and they learn, they don't kind of know what they don't know either. I mean, we never really did, but it's even worse. Onward. So yeah, we're talking a bit about pair programming.
Is there anything that you are like, I wouldn't like to learn with pair programming?
I've never tried this, and I haven't heard of it till I came here today. So thank you for the introduction to this. I know what my students would do. You would tell them, so from what I gather, there's sort of like 2 different roles, and they switch.
Yeah.
But I suspect if I give this to some of my students, one of them would just go, "Oh, I'll just do it," and they wouldn't actually. How do you get them to take those roles seriously?
I think you have to commit to it.
Yeah.
Do it every week. You gotta get them to evaluate how did that go. You gotta keep doing it, and I don't think I've got the energy to commit to it because I know that I'd have to do it. There'd be a lot of hassle of getting them into pairs and getting them to move around.
Yeah.
I mean, so we have because we have them in lecture theatre, we just like with the person next to you, or if they're in the workshop space, they're usually sat next to someone. And it's doable, but yeah, it's that bit of, you're only typing if someone tells you what to type.
Yeah.
And you've got to tell them what to.
I mean, I like to do something like this at least once, almost like an icebreaker, so that students early on have got the opportunity to talk to someone else. Because you do in every class, right? Just talk to your neighbour. At least they've got that opportunity later on to talk to someone and collaborate. But that's not really pair programming, is it?
No, and if you've got someone who's autistic.
So how do you manage things like that? Do you let people choose their own partner? Do you force people together? How do you? I know my students, not necessarily in a programming setting, but they do not want to work with anyone else. and they're absolutely adamant. How do you manage that?
So it's just telling them in advance, letting them know that this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I work with a charity, I work with adults with learning disability and autism a lot, and I had a lot of students when I taught secondary with needs, and yeah, just letting them know, and they can opt out. You know, you can't force them to do it, but giving them that opt out option, and then having maybe a group work as a 3. You know, 2 navigators, or you know, 1 navigator and 2 people coding actually works quite well, and then they just rotate the roles that way. But it's tricky.
I think the problem, so I've never done this with undergraduates, but I've done, I'm going to put you in a group and we're going to do a group class. And miraculously, everybody who I've been told might struggle with it isn't in class that day. And they're like, oh, I'm just not coming because, and so then they miss out on all the 90% of the class that was not the group task. Yeah. And so I think it's hard to not put people off.
And then I guess it's selling the why we're doing it to them, right? It's explaining the why. Because I don't think we often explain why we do stuff.
Yeah.
You know, we do it, but we don't often explain the logic for it. Explicitly modelling.
Students like this.
Yeah.
We always ask for this kind of stuff.
That's the related. It's assessment related, right? They want to see how.
It may not be.
But it is also self-evaluation. I've done this work, but often I get students go, well, I've done this and it works, but have I done it right? Have I got the right approach? And this is great, because this is the question we want them to ask themselves.
Yeah.
And I think I want to do more of this in my classes, actually. I don't do enough because I'm always in my own classes.
Yeah.
You know, to be students.
So what might be a drawback?
Well, you can do too much of it, of course. Just take over the class. Because I often find this with not just with computing, but when for TAs in charge of small classes, they do a lot of this because the students ask for it, and then the students don't have any time actually to do the work or to ask questions and stuff. Then they stop coming.
If you're a shy student, are you going to ask for it to be re-explained if you don't quite get how it was explained? No. And it's great doing it in the room, but how else might we need it shared for them to make use of it later?
Yeah, you can't rely on this as the only way you.
I think basically, no matter what, there's no perfect teaching.
No.
So right, nothing is going to suit everyone, and it's about having a mix of different things so that everyone finds something
Yeah.
they can go up on board with.
Yeah, I mean,
This is quite good for when you're being spontaneous in the classroom, I think. Like, I've noticed loads of students are struggling with this, or they've just finished this. Let's bring everyone together.
yeah, we do this a lot in the lecture section bit. Actually, if we spot they're struggling with something, or something that came up in the quiz that they didn't get, then actually we do this a lot.
And there's stuff that they'll get from this that they wouldn't see otherwise. They'll see you actually doing stuff, the way you do it, the way you naturally program it, even the way you move your cursor around.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing a load of students in one class running their code in some really weird way. They're all doing this right click and they're clicking, but why are you that way? Turned out that's what the lecturer demonstrated in class. And they just copied it. So this can be good and bad, of course.
Yeah. So they highlight the line and hit play and like whatever it was. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I like to talk about my thought process.
Yeah.
And I make mistakes.
Yeah. So
this is you know.
Yeah.
This is me making mistakes. This is authentic.
So exactly what we're doing in participatory live coding. If we're making an error, I won't even necessarily correct it. I'll let them tell me I've made a typo, and then fix it. And they do. And they do. Discovery based. Potential issues.
Don't learn what you want them to learn. They learn something else. They learn
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
Or they freeload off other students into a group project, or
Yeah.
But I think this is where students do much for their learning. Isn't it?
It's really hard to set up well, and it's
You need good projects.
yeah.
But even in the in the lab. So I was doing research about this, that you have to structure lab exercises right. So there is that bit of between the theory and the practice, but the right level of challenge, and write it in the right way that they get the thing out of it you want them to get out of it. And that they just don't get really frustrated and bin it. And it's not too easy either. So it's actually incredibly, to get it right is difficult, but it has a lot of rewards.
Yeah, half my module is this is very authentic, and students love it and they hate it. And then,
I think for weaker students as well, it can be a bit daunting.
Yeah.
and it's hard. It's just an assessment that's hard because you've got to get all the same assessment.
Yeah, but I mean, even if it's not an assessment, I mean, with our flick lecture, some of them, when they get the exercise in the lecture, they're just like, meh.
It's a case of giving them a variety of stuff and help to identify what level they are. I think. Well, don't do this authentic thing until you've done. So you have to do loops and whatever the other basics are.
One of my colleagues is trying to make essentially a local chatbot that will scaffold at different levels depending on what it's seen you do in the previous classes. And so we set one question and we set lots of different approaches to scaffolding, and it will move people around.
That sounds amazing.
We're teaching it in we're teaching it in the spring, so we'll see how it goes.
See, I'm not that, no. Because then you lose that skill as an educator, you don't spot it and deal with it yourself.
Got a massive class though.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's trade-off,
Yeah.
right? Lectures and lab sessions. Good and bad?
I don't know what actually that means to go into traditional work.
So
I never studied computing. So.
no, so I would literally have someone like talk at me for 3 hours about programming theory or the maths and write on acetate. And these days, in theory, your stuff's supposed to be Moodle the week before.
Yeah.
UCL policy, it should be Moodle 5 days before. So in theory, they have seen the lecture notes in advance, right? So now they can see that. But I mean, I did not have that. I used to have like, oh my god. So this is the guy who said even a monkey could do anything, right? Rod and his dicky bow. And he'd have this roll of acetate. Compiler theory, writing on this roll of acetate. That was it, right? And that was all we got. And it'd be really difficult because it's like compiler theory and stuff. And he'd be like, well, yeah, even a monkey can do this. And then if he dared to come in once he started, he'd bore you out in front of 200 other students as well. You'd have to come back and breath.
And then the lab, which is be some exercises.
It'd be some exercises. So you would have a kind of like a lecture for 3 hours, like a traditional style lecture. And then you would actually have a separate session where you would, so like you'd have a biology lecture and then you might go in the lab and cut up a frog or something. I don't know. I mean, I played with I'm an electrical engineer and a computer scientist. So, I plug things in and try not to blow them up. Generally, that's kind of how it works.
See, for me, I love giving a lecture. But the irony is, as a student, I can't take stuff in.
Yeah.
If it's just talked at me, I have to actually do it myself.
Yeah.
So programming doesn't lend itself to lectures, does it really? I tried giving lectures for one of them. Nobody came, so I just gave up. But I've tried it.
I mean, that was my entire undergrad was this.
Keyboard.
This is my entire undergrad.
Yeah, but this is computer science.
Yeah.
Style of teaching. Tradition.
What are your takes, just out of curiosity, on recorded lectures that students send about back later?
I'm very comfortable with it.
Yeah, I record all mine.
Because
Yeah.
some lectures they don't like them, students don't show up, or they're spoken to, but I love them as a student because I could schedule make way more courses that would normally clash. And I could watch back the lectures in 2 times speed and then go back to the parts that were difficult, and then all the silences or it doesn't take so long. So yeah.
Yes, from an accessibility perspective, recording's great.
I don't mind.
Some of our colleagues really moan though because they don't want it recorded.
But there's other reasons as well, like I know. I don't.
I mean, to be honest, they can just sit there with their phone in their laptop.
Yeah, we have some issues with students who are watching the recorded sessions and translating them. And so they're learning it in their native language, and then we're assessing it in English.
Oh no, they just have ChatGPT running in real time on their laptop in the lecture.
So we don't have them doing that. Most of them don't have their laptops up.
We do.
But it's like, well, you're not learning, and then we take them in the field, and it's suddenly like a, oh dear, what's gone on here kind of thing. But
yeah,
we still record them.
But we're seeing them. They've got their laptops in real time, so they're not learning the way that they used to learn. So a few years ago, by January, February, their English would be so much better than it is in October. That's not happening now.
Yeah, well, that's
English languages are becoming more and more of a problem.
Yeah,
for sure.
Flipped classroom.
I used to do this a lot.
Why used to?
Student engagement with the pre-session material was not great. Yeah.
What group of students might this be problematic for?
So you're talking here about giving the students all the material in advance, and maybe videos and stuff, and then in a lecture theatre, typically, where you would normally have a lecture, we're just going to do some problems and stuff.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah. Or discussion, yeah. So if you've got students, oh, sorry.
Thank you.
What about students that have to work for financial reasons?
I mean, it can work for them because they have this material they can do at their own pace. So the feedback I used to get from students, and actually they really liked it because they could schedule in their work around all their other commitments.
But you don't need to have classes. All you need is to deliver them the material in some offline way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to flip the classroom.
But there's generally more content if it's a flipped classroom that's available to them offline than you would for a normal one. So then you've got a higher load in advance that might be more difficult to schedule.
I mean, the reason I don't do this, other classes, the material just doesn't exist. So I've got to go away and write the material. I will do this once I've written the material. You know, the material is what I write on the board. So I've got my notes and right, I'm talking about maths lectures. And I want to make a full set of material as a resource for everybody who's teaching on the course, including TAs. Just haven't had time to do it.
I think there's a difference between making resources available and specifically making your classroom a flipped classroom.
Yeah.
In that you're saying you will need to look at this before you come, because my session is going to be on the basis that you have read and digested that material.
Yeah. And sometimes we sent them away to actually go and cover the content because they can't do what they need to do in the room.
It also gives them time to think about things, especially the tricky concepts.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, in a lecture, sort of that being bombarded at you, that's not going to go in.
Yeah.
I'd love to do more for it.
Yeah.
I just need to spend time preparing stuff.
But again, I think it's what you said earlier about explaining to students why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of students ask for it, actually. I mean, a lot of students won't engage with it, then other students are like, well, I really need to see this stuff.
Then you've got the
When it
split
comes
class.
to do with
Yeah.
inclusivity,
And then some are like, well, you know, why I'm in here doing exercises when I can be doing that and you're not. There's a whole bunch
but
of.
there's other things you can do other than exercise. You can kind of do discussions, you can do work problems.
Yeah.
You know, you miss out on the boring details. Oh, you didn't get the boring detail because you didn't. You're going to have to do it now or later.
Cool. Right. So, right. Does that mean anything? Right, so this is from a book where all the input is videos. There are no notes. It's a video with a transcript, and this is the first 20 seconds of a transcript. If you are a visually impaired student, even if you had the script, would you be able to relate that to actually this document lines of code on it? No. Right, so this is this bit, right? you may have checked it, because I was asked about this, because I moaned that, yeah, they've got all these transcripts in this course, but actually they mean nothing on their own. So I know I want a nice piece of proper literate programming with a nice explanation and the code chunk and, right? Because that, or, you know, line numbers, and actually talk about the line numbers, but just because technically you've checked the accessibility box, like the beautiful maths lecture that had all these formulas with no context, but it had the title at the top, it passed the accessibility checker because the document had the title and it had these things in it.
Oh, very skeptical now.
But I mean, so this thing about headings, because like PDFs are a nightmare because you lose all that. There's no way to navigate the document. But there was no explanation of what any of these things were unless you'd watched the video. It was just like a whole bunch of things on a sheet of paper that technically, you know, they were given the thing, but it meant nothing. So if you are flipping and you're putting your lecture material online in advance, you know, you may have technically ticked the accessibility box, but have you considered this? So universal design for learning is this bit where you consider the different ways and means of expressing. So that transcript needs to be meaningful, right? You need to say, right, so we are in this script, we're online, blah, 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 it is function, blah, we are changing this bit of here. So it's all of this. So we kind of argue that actually we need to consider this, and this is quite a detailed document, and the table for this is huge, right? So it's all about that learner agency in it, and you're giving them the different means of expressing it. And this is certainly when you've got neurodiverse students, they need this mixture of stuff. And I think all students do, right? So if we're talking about UCL learning design, if you've ever been through the ABC, we talk about Dan and Laura's conversation frameworks, and there's 6 types of learning, and you want to have a mixture of all those 6 throughout your modules. And this is kind of taking that to that extra bit. It's that different bit of engaging them differently, representing the information differently, and then having different ways of doing tasks. And we kind of know that certainly when we do the participate live coding, well, we're only hitting one thing, and there is no real other way of expressing that. So we kind of found that when we looked at various methods, if we can bring elements of this in, then we make it much more accessible and inclusive to a much broader range of students, versus then actually if we just kind of think about it in a more traditional way. Is there anything else you wanted to?
I don't think so. I'd say there's lots of examples of how to apply this.
Yeah.
Some of them I sometimes look at and I'm like, I'm sure this would work for some type of teaching, but it wouldn't.
Yeah.
It wouldn't ever be suitable for like this type of teaching I do, and that's fine because there's so many others that you can.
Yeah, so when we wrote the book chapter, we looked at those different types of teaching. We wrote about all the pros and cons, and then I was doing a separate project for the University of London, which was related to their BCS modern computer science, and I got to look at some of their like the MOOCs that they do, and there's part of those MOOCs that actually feature in their module, and that transcript is from one of the MOOCs that is on Coursera. So there were things I picked up. So that report is available online, and I've kind of got recommendations in there that if you are doing kind of programming, teaching, CS, teaching online, the things that you need to think about. And some of that is, right, great, you've got a video and a transcript, but I want an annotated Jupyter notebook, please, with stuff in as well, so that, you know, you can read it properly. If you can't see it, you can understand what's going on. And I know people that just hate videos, right?
Like films, right? Films come with captions and they come with audio description.
Yeah. The audio description. And yeah, that's what we kind of wanted to talk about with this. There was just one more thing I think I wanted to. I'm going to stop sharing this. I don't even know if that was actually shared, and if anyone's seen it in the recording, it doesn't look like it. That's really annoying. Oh no, it is sharing. That's cool. Right, I'm going to pop the slides back up, and then I'm going to try and share slides. And that's looking at the wrong screen. Okay. You can't see anything now because it's all got very confused. Okay, let me think about where this is. Right, let me put that back over there, behind there. Okay. Fabulous. Okay. Cool. We would just like some feedback from the session, please. We have a team on Microsoft Teams called Teaching and Coding in UCL. That we post things on that are interesting, that relates to all of this. And then we're going to try and test, it was going to be coffee mornings, but I couldn't work out a morning that I was available. So we've gone for a coffee afternoon just before Christmas. So if you remember the Houseman, please join us in Houseman. If you're not, let me know and I will just let you in. And I won't tell that you're not a member of the Houseman. If you are a guest, we can sign you in. So please come and join us for coffee and a chat. And we're going to look to have kind of like more like a monthly chat that's informal to go along with the termly sessions that are like this. And yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see if I can find the Zoom controls. I can stop the session. Yeah, please take cake with you and crisps.